introduction. My name's Andrew Petrosoniak. I work here at St. Mike's, and then I also work at, I work kind of in the sim lab, which is down below here with my colleagues here, Sue and Ashley, and Phil. And so Phil is joining us. Everybody say hi to Phil. Phil's mannequin. Phil's waving. Phil is who we work with often, so we decided to bring him along today. Oh, yeah, he's okay. He's exhausted. He's heard this talk before, so it's not a big problem. So we're going to talk, I do research, simulation research, and I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about that. I won't bore you with the details about the data that we get, but hopefully give you a sense of some of the stuff that we can do with simulation, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So before you listen to anybody talk, you got to sort of get a sense of who they are. Can you believe them? Are they credible? So when you hear that you have to come and listen to a scientist talk, maybe you're thinking about you're going to listen to this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is? Yeah, that's right. Good call. Yeah. So Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Maybe it's a little older of a film, but it was sort of a prototypical scientist and inventor, and maybe doesn't always give scientists the best name because then you think like it's boring and they're crazy and stuff like that. Maybe people have said the same about me. I don't know, but I think scientists and researchers, you can be normal people. So this is my social media situation. I don't have Instagram. Imagine that. Like imagine not having that. I don't have Snapchat. I recently deleted Facebook, not because of the Russians, but just because I wasn't using it as much. And I did just get WhatsApp, but mostly on Twitter. So that's easy. If you guys wanted to find me, that's sort of who I am. I have a wife. We go to Blue Jays games together. So I'm a normal person. I have two wonderful kids. I don't put pictures up just in case they end up on social media, but they're great kids. And we have a good time together. We go to the cottage. We go skiing, that sort of stuff. This isn't me, though Sue thought that it looked like me. It could be me, I guess. I couldn't find pictures of me when I was a kid, but I had that same haircut, unfortunately. It's kind of, I think I was ahead of my time because now like the undercut fade is like back in, right? And this is it. And anyways, so that's who I am. Do you guys have any questions? You do? No? Okay. So when I was in university, I went to McMaster and I studied biology. And I thought I wanted to, I spent a summer and then a whole year in the lab doing this. And when I started thinking about doing research, this is what, I don't know, when you think of research or science, is this what comes to mind? No? What comes to mind when you guys think of research or science?
Basic science.
This is basic science, yeah. What do you, anybody? Do you guys think of this? What do you think about when somebody says, I'm a scientist or I do research? What do you think about?
Like a really big laboratory, like a bunch of machines.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's certainly, that would fall under what I would think about when I think about science. Anybody else? Ashley?
Like locked in a room, like everything's very secretive.
Yeah.
White coats.
Right, exactly.
White reds.
Pardon?
White reds.
White reds.
Rats.
Oh, rats, yeah, rats, yeah. In cages and things like that. Like I don't really think of myself, I guess the fact that I have a title scientist, that doesn't really resonate with me, but I guess that's what we do. We do some science, and I don't have anything like this in my life. I did this for a year, and I actually hated it. And I realized, like, I'm never doing science again. I don't want to do research. I don't like it. I hated looking at cells and dye and trying to decide if the mutation got uptaken by these cells, and it was so difficult for me. Great that there are people out there doing it because you can do excellent work. But for me, it wasn't something that I was interested in. So I thought, okay, I'll put that aside. And then I went to medical school, and I got involved in research again. But this time, I started doing different kind of research. I started getting involved with people and people research. And for me, that was a lot more interesting. Who plays sports? Anybody? Who plays an instrument? Who does something that they practice to get better? Most people, right? And who has somebody coaching them when they do that? Anybody? Yeah. So when you have a coach, what does that coach do? What do they help you with? What do they do? What do they talk to you? What do they tell you? If you're a basketball player, yeah.
They tell you how to do something correctly.
Right.
If your form is off, if your procedure is off.
Yeah, exactly, right? They watch you do something, whether it's shooting free throws like this person, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's doing whatever technical skill. They watch you, they give you some feedback, you make some changes, you get better, right? Doesn't matter what it is in life, that's sort of how we get better at things. And eventually, sometimes the coach goes away, and you just sort of plateau, and you just do the same thing forever and ever and ever. Ideally, if you're trying to become an expert at something, you have a coach the whole time, or you continually think about trying to get better. Like if you're a basketball player, the best players in the world still have coaches. LeBron James still has a coach. A bit weird. Why would the best player in the world need a coach? And he kind of thinks he's his own coach, but that's a different thing. But the idea that he's going to get feedback on a regular basis about how he's doing to kind of get better. And so that's where I sort of, that's what I got interested in, is practice. And how do we do that? What is practice? Practice is an opportunity to repeat what is whatever your skill is. So if you're doing, if you play basketball, you go to basketball practice. I just picked basketball because that's my favorite sport. Go to basketball practice. The coach sets up a situation, a scenario, whether it's the last 2 minutes, and then they make you, you go through it, and then hopefully the goal is that whatever you learn in practice, you then apply to real life. Does that make sense? So if you're practicing free throws, maybe they make you do a bunch of suicide drills where you got to run up and down and then make you tired to simulate what it's like when you are going to be shooting free throws in real life, in the middle of a game. With your piano coach and you're practicing, you're going to focus in on certain parts of the piece that is more difficult, so that when you go and perform, you're going to excel. So all of that is actually a simulation. So simulation recreates reality, and that's what I spend time studying. And the same that applies for our in sports or any skill.
Oh my gosh,
Oh.
my husband, please, somebody help me. Sorry, please. Somebody help.
Does anybody know CPR? Does anybody know? Do you? Can you come up?
Please help.
Yeah, come up.
Honey, wait.
Does anybody else know CPR?
He's not breathing. Please.
Can somebody call on that phone, call 911?
Oh, God.
I need somebody. You come on up.
Somebody help me.
Introduce yourself to her, and
I can't do depressions.
do you want to come up and help? Can somebody call 911 on that phone? I need somebody. And can somebody call 911? Call 911 and tell them that, I don't know, you can ask them what's going on, but somebody needs to come quick. There's an AED, guys, outside. Can somebody grab it? It's right on the stretcher. Can somebody grab the AED? Can somebody grab the AED? We need somebody to grab the AED. Quick. Can somebody grab it? Thank you. And bring it in.
Is he going to be okay? What's happening? Let me know when you're tired.
Can somebody else give her a hand?
Please.
Can somebody help?
We have kids. Please don't let them die. Please don't let them die. Please. Please. I'll do the 2 breaths. Keep going. Don't.
You guys can come around and watch if you want. Are you getting tired? Do you want to switch out?
Did you call 911?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are they coming?
Okay.
They know what's happened, that somebody, I don't know, is unconscious?
You give them the address. They know where Lee Cushing is.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to help? Can you do CPR for a second? Do you-
Yeah.
So to switch out, I want you to count down from 3, and when she's done, you'll jump in, okay? So go 5, 4, 3, 2,
Okay, start doing CPR. That's it.
Perfect. Now keep your arms nice and straight. Beautiful. Excellent. And we'll keep doing this until the police come.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks very much, guys. Big round of applause. All right, come on back, have a seat. Phil remarkably always comes back to life. He does great.
Do you want to sit him up?
Yeah, we'll sit Phil back up so he can listen to he's heard this talk, but he's,
He's our best participant.
yeah, there we go. Get him back in. Oh, thanks, buddy. So that was Phil. Big round of applause for Phil. He's got like 1,000 lives. And thank you, and thank you, and thank you. So we just ran a simulation. We just recreated reality. I mean, you may not have believed it because Phil's a mannequin, but there's some element, I bet, that thought, wait a second, I got to do something, because you're sort of torn between that. Well, this isn't real, but wait a second, I don't know. And then you sort of get into it. You're like, oh, I got to make a phone call. I got to tell somebody something. I got to go get something. How do I actually do CPR? And so by using simulation, we can actually start doing practice. Just the same way you'd be shooting a basketball, practicing your music, all of that sort of thing. Anybody have any thoughts about what just happened here?
So when we're doing CPR, are we supposed to push really, really hard?
Okay, great question. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I wasn't really pushing all that hard, and I was worried that if that was actual CPR, then that wouldn't be enough.
Right, okay, great thought. And I'll answer that question in a second. Anybody else have any comments?
Probably that there wasn't any specific identification made to that they should do something. For example, like calling out a specific individual to do an action, such as doing CPR, calling to a phone, working with the AED. Right. I mean, this just happened. I mean, I kind of directed a few, I tried to solicit some. But you can imagine what happens when this happens in real life. You don't always have a leader. Ideally, when we run this downstairs in the sim lab, we designate a leader to be able to say, hey, you're going to be doing CPR when you're done. Ashley sort of took that role and was kind of coaching people through. Sue, not useful. She was erratic and, concerned about her husband. You guys haven't defined your relationship. Okay. And so, that's right. The importance of a leader, sometimes we don't have that opportunity when we have a patient that arrests, in the Eaton Center. Exactly. And it does cause a bit of confusion, right? You don't really know who should do what. When should I stop CPR, particularly when there's non-medically trained people around. Anybody else have any comments? Anybody else have anything that sort of came to mind when you watched this?
Should maybe someone else have come and a doctor would come to?
Yeah.
She needed some medical attention or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't CPR kind of thing, but someone to maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and we're doing something.
That's right. Yeah, it can be very distracting to have a family member. You can't imagine how difficult this would be for that family member to watch their partner arrest or to be unconscious and not know, particularly if you're non-medical. Maybe if you're medical, it's even worse. And yeah, absolutely. And it can be distracting to the people trying to provide care. So we often talk about that in the sim lab when we do these simulations. When we recreate reality, we bring in bystanders to be, difficult, sometimes emotional, all of that sort of thing to try and get people, us as doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, all of those things to get used to having to deal with all that because it can be very chaotic. Anybody else have any thoughts? Or any comments, questions about what happened? I'm going to answer the question about the CPR depth or how hard you push. What we can do by using Phil is actually we can teach you how to do that. That's part of what the value is of doing mannequin-based simulation. So that's what we call it. That's what we would call this. Using a mannequin to recreate reality. We can actually practice how hard we're going to push. So we got to push really hard. Okay? Oftentimes ribs actually break for these patients. And that's okay, because it means that you're pressing hard. You have to go down to about 2 inches. That's the depth. Okay, so that can be pretty traumatic for the people doing it. Who's learned how to do CPR before? Yeah? Okay. Did you guys learn that part? That might happen? Yeah. So what we've just done, we've taken one skill using simulation. And now we can start talking, and you guys already brought up some of this stuff. We had a question about how do you actually do the skill, right? So you actually, you do press pretty hard. Your arms are locked, and we can show you with the mannequin, you lock your arms, and you're sort of counting up and down, okay? And you're going at a rate of about 100 a minute. So it's quite quick. I noticed here it was probably too slow. But that's common. That happens with everybody. Even in the hospital, we don't do a great job all the time. So we have feedback mechanisms to kind of tell us speed up. It actually tells you to speed up. I don't know if the AED does. Does the AED? Does that one?
Push harder.
Push harder. There you go. So it's actually all designed to tell you, as best they can, to tell you what to do. So now we can start we can use simulation to help you improve your skill. We can improve teamwork. Now it's hard to teach people that are bystanders how to be better teammates, team members. But in a hospital team, we can do that. We do that all the time. And then we can talk about the environment, and that's the stuff that actually I've become interested in more recently. If somebody had an arrest here, the actual AED is, I just learned this yesterday, is you got to go up the stairs, down the stairs to the security office next door. It would realistically take somebody that didn't know where they were, it would probably be 5 minutes, right? So if I knew where I was going, maybe 2. But you still got to go up the stair or outside and around. So then you might start thinking, hey, why don't we use this simulation to maybe say, should we not put an AED on this building? And so then you find out, because if I didn't put that AED outside, and I said, well, okay, let's see how this works. And then we find out, hey, wait a second, we can't find the AED. And if you guys can't find it, it's not because you're stupid, it's because it's not well placed. Right? Just like when you walk through the mall and you see the AEDs now in places, and you go to the gym and it's in there and stuff, they're always sort of relatively in good position. But clearly, we're not doing a very good job here next to a hospital. I guess we just rely on the hospital. Here's a video I'm going to show you of, how long do we have?
Until 1.
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll be done way before then. This is a video that I do what's called in situ simulations, simulations within the environment. That's what I do a lot of it, in situ. This is in situ simulation of cardiac arrest of a person that just arrested right here. So this is a video that we filmed in Dublin. I was at a conference there, and we were recreating a cardiac arrest in a hospital lobby. Hotel lobby. Ooh, hopefully it works. No? Oh, this is a fail on my part. I didn't check my video. Let's see. There we are. I don't think, there's no sound, there's not much that you need to hear. So what you can see, a little bit tough with the, let's see this. So this is the person, that's the AED, the automated external defibrillator. There's somebody performing CPR. This guy is a mannequin, so don't freak out. He just fell down the escalator, and we have a bunch of people around who are evaluating how this goes, and we're testing out the ability to perform CPR and get all the necessary equipment in a hotel lobby should somebody have an arrest. That's me filming, both on my phone, and then I'm the one holding the GoPro. You can see them putting on the pads. And now we could sort of evaluate, hey, how's the CPR? So she's doing a pretty good job, but she's pausing there. She kind of stopped. We never want to stop when we're doing CPR. This is the team leader. Okay, so fortunately, these are all medical people. They're all nurses and physicians. And she's sort of checking out, making sure things are going okay, checking in on her partner. See, here's a problem. They can't see the rhythm because the glare of the windows. So that's a problem. So then you actually pause the CPR. It's not very good for the patients. You would never know this until you actually do it. So we do this in real life. This guy's on his phone, maybe sending a tweet later. And then they just defibrillated the patient and now they're back doing CPR. Kind of cool. Yeah. So there are a couple things that came up. Is there a way to stop the escalator quickly? Because you need to do that because it's not great for. Yeah. So there's lots of things that happen when you think, okay, I just got to teach people how to do CPR, but there's a lot more than that, right? Sometimes. So what? No, he'd be okay. I mean, ideally, you don't want him going back up the escalator. So. Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, they could have. They did a little bit actually. Prior to that, he's actually on the escalator. They pulled him off, and they decided that was as far they needed. But you could move him even further. Yeah. So those are the types of questions that we can start answering with simulation, because you don't want to wait for real life for this to happen. Ideally, if you can develop some protocols and some ways of doing this, we can do this. Simulation came from aviation. We borrowed it from pilots 30 years ago or so, because pilots realized pretty quickly they don't want to be flying the first time with their buddy who's it's their first time flying a 747. We better make sure that they know how to take off and land the plane beforehand. So there's a little vested interest, their own self-interest there. And so they would practice on a flight simulator, and we thought, well, that's a good idea. We should do the same. And so we borrowed simulation, and we, the anesthetists, the people that put breathing tubes down people's airways when you go to sleep for a operation, they're the first people that really started simulation, and they practiced how to put the breathing tube in, how to manage patients when they were in an operation, all of that stuff, and then now we've expanded it. What you're kind of doing, who's ever driven a car or been in a car? Yeah, most of us, right? All of the cars that we drive are crash tested before they go on the road. That's a good thing. The ones that don't make it on the road failed their crash test, or the engineers went back and they looked at all of that stuff to tweak it, make sure that it's safer for us. What we're doing is crash testing a system using simulation, the exact same thing. We're testing it before it goes live, or even if it's gone live. And we think, we better make sure that it all works, make sure the AED works. And so that's what we get to do. That's what my research is all about, is crash testing the system. And the nice part about it is I get to use my imagination, come up, I don't know. Yesterday I was like, what are we going to do I got to do a simulation in a talk for simulation. So I get to do something like this, bring Phil, get some people involved, hear from you guys some of your thoughts, that sort of thing. We get to use our imaginations all the time. Not once am I pipetting any cells into a test tube, but we get still pretty valuable data. This is actually this footage from some of the work that we do. This is 4 different views in our trauma room. This should look to you like a real trauma case. If you've watched any medical shows on TV, they're not exactly perfect, but this looks like real life. The only difference is, this isn't Phil. This is Phil's grandma. This is the patient, not a real patient. And what we do is we recreate scenarios to teach, to find problems with our situation. We developed this thing. This is a tracing tool. We track where the nurses move during a trauma case. So we use this tracing tool. Look at it. So each color is a different nurse. This is time-lapsed over about 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes. That's roughly how long the scenarios are. People lose interest after 15 minutes. It's a lot of movement, eh? Now, if I asked you, if you were the architect or in charge of design, take the yellow person. Any way that you might think, what do we notice about this yellow person? Spend a lot of time over here. This is where the patient is. But they had to, something was happening over here. Any way you might redesign this space?
Seems like that's some kind of supply or like general area that needs to be accessed by itself. Move it to a centralized area of the room that doesn't really block the walkway, but it's not far from the
Exactly. Brilliant. You're hired. So yeah, so there's a lot of equipment over here that somebody's grabbing. And what's crazy, you think, well, a hospital should be perfectly designed. You take care of sick people all the time. And because I'm on camera, St. Mike's is wonderfully designed. There's essentially no flaws. But in theory, I don't know where this was filmed. A hypothetical hospital we'll call St. Luke's. And, you know, there are areas for improvement. This person's probably not too bad, right? All of their stuff is kind of around where they need to be. But suddenly you can you don't have to wait for a real patient. You can just create the same scenario. People behave the same way. It's amazing. People behave very close to real life. You get the same emotions. We see the same arguments between people. It's amazing what happens. Who has an iPhone or Samsung or some type of smartphone? I think everybody, right? Nobody has flip phones anymore, do they? I don't think so. How does this work? Good, bad? Does it make sense? Do you even think of how good or bad it is? I mean, I don't mean bad in the way that, oh, you know, you're always on your phone or something, your parents are mad at you. I mean, like, you know, how it works, how, you know, you swipe to one side, things make sense, things pop up when they should. You don't even think how good it is because it just works, right? That's beautiful design. It's a wonderful display of design. When things are designed well, we don't notice that there's a problem, right? It just works, so we don't ask questions. When things are designed poorly, then we're like, oh, that's terrible, right? You ever walk to a door and it's got a handle on the outside and you think that it's to pull, but it's actually a push? Right? It's so annoying. That's a terrible example of design, right? It's not cueing us the right way, whereas something like a phone, my 3-year-old can use the phone perfectly. She uses it better than I do. And she hasn't even gone to grade 1 yet, or kindergarten, and she can figure it out. So Apple clearly did something right. So the reason we get an opportunity, the reason it works so well is because they prototyped all of it. They made prototypes, they made examples of it, and they gave it to people. Because if they deliver a bad product, well, they don't make money. You know, that's a cynical way of thinking about it. But in general, you know, they wanted to produce a good product, and so they give those prototypes. Those are simulations. They would run simulations with people. If you just go ahead and you design something and then you just say, okay, well, here, it should work, you end up peeing on somebody. Right? So somebody mapping this out, you know, you put in the urinals, you're like, okay, I'm designing a washroom. I've got to put a couple of urinals in there. All right, this works. And then before you know it, you have this. If you had simply, you know, put up a picture of the urinals in the space beforehand, you would have realized, well, wait a second, we got to redesign this. This idea of prototyping or simulating the event is pretty powerful. So this is what we did at St. Mike's. We're building a new trauma bay actually right now. And we actually built this first. This is just sits on your desk. Move little pieces around, little cotton balls, moving them around, little pieces of paper. Then we ran simulations. We actually built a space to mock up of the actual place before before the construction started. And then this isn't the actual spot. This is another part of the emergency department. But then we went in and we did real simulations again. It was still a construction zone. That's why everybody's wearing their hard hats and their vests. And so we could, before any patient ever gets into the room, we're pretty satisfied with how it's going to work. We can't predict everything, but we can predict a lot better before by doing this, by running simulations. Any questions? I think I have 2 more slides and then we're done. Any comments? Thoughts? No? Quiet group, okay. This is the last thing I use simulation for. This is teaching skills. We talked about this at the beginning. This is emergency access to your neck, to get a breathing tube into your neck. The majority of the time we try and put a breathing tube down your throat if you need to breathe. For maybe you come in and you have a head injury and you're not breathing properly. Maybe you're going for an operation. We put a breathing tube down the throat, we give you medication, you go to sleep, you wake up, no problems. Sometimes we can't get down the mouth for lots of reasons. So we need to teach people how to be able to access the neck. It's an emergency procedure. It happens probably once or twice a year at St. Mike's, so it's not very frequent. It's called a cricothyroidotomy, or a surgical airway. You may have seen videos where people put ballpoint pens through the neck. Have you kind of seen that or heard that? That's the same concept, though this is medical. Ballpoint pen doesn't really work great, I'll be honest. You ever done a ballpoint pen, Dr. DeRosende? Ballpoint pen? No. Okay. Give him a scalpel and he's fine.
Or a pocket knife.
Yeah, there you go, a pocket knife. So what we do is we can teach people. Let's see. So, let's see, it's loading up. There we are. So you make an incision. You can feel in. It's a little bit, it's a bit hard to see with the light. I don't know. I'm not an AV. I think it's because of the light behind. Is it? All right. So we can now teach this skill because you can't practice on real people, but you got to perform it when you need it. This is life-saving. If you don't get the tube in, patient dies. So it's pretty high stakes. So you can see we're using different devices, different tools, eventually to get a breathing tube, a tube that's going to sit in the neck temporarily. Then they go to the operating room and we sort them out. By using simulation, we can practice this over and over again. So this isn't a real patient. This is one of our simulators. So people get to practice over and over and over. So the thought is that by the time real life happens, they're going to be prepared and ready to go. This is what it looks like, the setup when we do part of our study. Okay, so we got some video stuff, but we're practicing doing that. So this is the last slide. So I get an opportunity on a regular basis. I'm not constrained by any limits. I can recreate anything we want with the help of Sue and Ashley. We create lots of things. We get to design. We help inform design. We get to train people. We get to practice skills, make people better, with the whole goal of helping patients and helping nurses, doctors, and people around the hospital. So it's a pretty great thing. We gather data. We do research on that. We try and figure out better ways to teach. And I don't end up in a lab pipetting. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's not for me. And so that's how I spend my days when I'm not seeing patients actually in the emergency department.